said, look, if I leave in a pine box, that's what I got to do, but I'm going to race. I can remember him racing in Jacksonville, and he beat them all, but they wouldn't drop the checkered flag. And then when they did drop the checkered flag, they had my father in third place. One of the main reasons they gave was there was a white beauty queen, and they always kissed the driver. He finally got the money. But, of course, the trophy was gone. The fans were gone. The beauty queens were gone.
Did he ever consider not racing anymore?
Never. That was one of my daddy's saying. When it's too tough, everybody else is just right for me. Like I can remember one time when we were racing Atlanta 500, and he was sick. He needed an operation. And I said, Daddy, we don't have to race today. He whispered to me and said, lift my legs up and put me in the car. He drove 500 miles that day. He always felt like someday he's going to get his big break. But for 20 years, nobody mentioned one of those cars. But he didn't let it drive him crazy. I think that's what made him so great. He chose to be a race car driver, and he was going to race until he couldn't race no more.
You're watching Northwest Public TV, a service of the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication.
Coming up, the race for 270 is on.
Plus, Washington State has a few initiatives that could have large repercussions nationwide.
And students have conflicting opinions over the new ban on all things Greek. Those stories and more tonight on Murrow News 8.
From Studio B on the campus of Washington State University, this is Pullman's only nightly newscast. This is Murrow News 8.
Good evening, I'm Taylor Graham.
And I'm Calvin Crawford. Thanks for joining us for our 2016 election coverage.
A number of states have been claimed as the race winds down. It's a close race to 270 electoral votes needed to clinch the nomination. Donald Trump currently holds 238 votes compared to Hillary Clinton's 215. Although the two are neck and neck in terms of the Electoral College, it is interesting to see that Trump leads the popular vote. And as the national election is coming to a close, the candidates are fighting to win those last electoral votes. Students across campus have been following the election throughout the night, and our reporter, Kaylin King, spoke to viewers to get their reactions. Kaylin?
Well, Taylor, I've been here for a few hours now at the Cub still, and I've definitely noticed a change of tone in the atmosphere so far. I've went around and asked a few more people what they thought now that the election has been underway.
Personally, I'm kind of scared that if Trump wins, it's kind of, it's not looking good right now.
Same thing as like you said, I'm just scared about if Trump becomes president because, especially for minorities living in this country, it's like what's going to happen next? It's like, are we going to go backwards in time back to like the 60s?
Over here we have 5 Clinton supporters and then we have 1 Trump supporter, so it got a little awkward when it first started because none of us really knew who was voting for who.
I'm really overwhelmed right now. I am disappointed at a lot of states. I really thought, just because a lot of people were like on social media and everywhere, they just seem so anti-Trump and anti-Trump rhetoric, but apparently that's not what's showing right now.
This debate is very neck and neck so far. People are very staggered about the turn of events that's happening, but hopefully later down the road, time will tell to see who will be elected our next president. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Kaylin.
Well, while the election is still too close to call, the one fact is clear that this election will be historic either way.
Exactly. Hillary Clinton could be a huge night for her if she does become the first woman elected president. Notable moment for her if that were to happen.
Yeah, and then on the flip side of that election, you have Donald Trump doing momentous things to the Republican Party, major shakeup there, and also he's really looking like a major vote against the establishment.
Definitely. He's made waves across headlines, you know, his talk about abortion, immigration, tax cuts for the wealthy, but clearly a lot of analysts didn't see this coming, but it does show that there may be a silent majority.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the campaign, once again, you have Hillary Clinton, and she's made clear like a lot of her beliefs on things like women's reproductive rights and more, but has also chosen to attack Trump on some issues instead of offering any of her own clear-cut solutions, such as with immigration.
Yeah, and there's been a battle too. A prominent theme throughout this election cycle has been the Supreme Court and who the new commander-in-chief will nominate.
Yeah, Donald Trump recently released a list of longtime conservatives he would consider appointing to the highest court, while some Republican senators have stated they would block Hillary Clinton from appointing any justices. We go now to Murrow News 8 reporter Kyle Simchuk and political analyst Josh Murrow, who have been tracking results throughout the evening.
Yeah, that's right, Calvin. We're back here with Josh Murrow, our political analyst. He is a PhD student of politics here at WSU. And Josh, it's been an interesting night here, to say the least, a fascinating night. And I got to say, I really feel fortunate to be able to sit here and pick your brain about everything. So thank you for coming in and speaking with us. First off, the race, or the election results rather, seem to be a little tighter than people have predicted. Looking at this, is there anything that surprises you or has surprised you about tonight?
Absolutely, Kyle. And I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity to be able to speak to you and your audience about this momentous night. But go into your question about what the surprise might be thus far is primarily found around the Great Lakes. And as we can see, the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and even Pennsylvania have not yet been called for one candidate or another. And what this means is trouble for Hillary Clinton at this point in time, simply because she was predicted to have a little bit more of a safe buffer, as it were, leading up to election night. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, throughout the course of this election, I guess specifically with Democrats, there's been fear that third-party candidates could potentially take votes away from Clinton. And, you know, even Barack Obama has said that if you vote for a third party, you're just giving your vote to Trump. On top of that, there also have been people saying that Bernie Sanders supporters, you know, there may be a threat of a staged vote protest, you know, a protest vote. So do you think any of those fears are legitimate?
Well, thus far we've seen a lot of the third-party votes at about equivalent level as we've seen in previous presidential election cycles. What is notable about the people who are voting for third-party candidates is that millennials or younger voters are voting at higher rates for third-party candidates than the rest of the electorate in the aggregate. So what this means is that both major parties will have to do some soul-searching and consideration of how they reach out to young voters after tonight.
Absolutely, and there's still lots more to discuss tonight. We will be back later with a closer look at local initiatives, plus how the result of this election will impact the Supreme Court. So Taylor, Calvin, we'll see you in a little bit.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Josh. Really interesting what they had to say there about the third-party candidates in the protest vote.
Definitely, definitely. Coming up, we break down the initiatives with Brooklyn Graditi to see which were passed and which were not, so stick around.
When you're out there, there's no telling what you'll find.
I see it, I see it! Oh, look at you.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
The great outside. My new mom and I have a lot in common.
So shiny.
We both love the outdoors.
That's not a flower.
And she knows a lot about wildlife.
A labradoodle.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
If you want to be a parent, it doesn't matter how you play or even what you wear. You just need to be there. Thousands of teens in foster care don't need perfection. They just need you.
Get caught buzz driving, and you could do some hard time.
Craig,
Knock it off.
Sorry, Mom. It could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. And that could set you back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
We continue our election coverage now with the results of some of the ballot initiatives across the state. Brooklyn is here with us again to tell us about the outcome. Brooklyn, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Brooklyn, we're all wondering which initiatives passed, which ones failed, and what's going on here in the state of Washington.
Yeah, so again, I mean, the numbers aren't 100% yet. We don't know for sure what's passing, what's failing, but I can give you what is likely to pass. So what we discussed before, the firearms, courts being able to ban firearms from people who likely might hurt someone they love or hurt themselves, that's looking like it's going to pass 70-30. So again, an initiative is a petition signed by voters that can bring about a public vote and then turn into law. So this doesn't necessarily mean right away that it's a law, but it means that the public will get a chance to vote on it. Also, a minimum wage raise, that's looking like it's going to pass for sure, about 60-40, which is good. So again, by 2020, we should see a minimum wage of $13.50. And then also, what's not going to pass is the carbon tax. So every county but King County voted no on this, which is pretty surprising. So it was about 60-40 since King County is so big, but everyone but King County said no.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. So going off of that, what are some of the initiatives that we haven't gotten the chance to discuss?
Yeah, of course. So there were 6 on the ballot. So there's 3 more. There was an initiative that wants to change campaign finances. So that could mean more public financing and less big money in the elections. So this means directing state money to candidates of the public's choice. And this is really 50-50 right now. We're going to have to check in tomorrow and see, because it's could go either way right now. Also, there is a initiative that looking like it's going to pass that protects seniors who have in-home caregivers from their private information. So this could protect them from identity theft, right, consumer fraud, penalties like that. And then also, lastly, Initiative 735, this will overturn Citizens United. So this proposes that the federal Constitution amendment changes to reserve constitutional rights for people and not corporations. And again, these are all, that's looking like it's going to pass, but these aren't for sure. So we'll see if they are approved, and then the public will get a chance to vote on them.
That's really interesting there, especially with the campaign finance one, seeing how money has influenced this election with Donald Trump, where he says he's self-financing, and then Hillary Clinton, where people have made links to her in banks and a lot of private lobbying things. So very interesting to see how that's all going to shake out there.
Mm-hmm. And how does some of these initiatives relate back to Pullman? How can Pullman residents expect these initiatives to impact them personally?
Right. I mean, I think a lot of college students living here in Pullman will be happy to see a minimum wage increase. I think that's nice. I know Seattle's trying to get theirs up to $15 an hour, and I think that that's something that someone who's working a minimum wage job could widely agree on. Also, I mean, it's pretty interesting to see how this firearms law kind of played out. I mean, it's pretty overwhelming how everyone voted yes on it. I think that the wording in that one is a little bit vague, and we'll have to see. I think all of these are pretty interesting on when they actually go to the public on voting, if they're going to become law, what they'll decide. And I mean, King County making some big decisions there, so we'll
Definitely.
see.
And it's interesting because in the pamphlet, you see either side of the initiative and how one side it sounds a certain way, and then you look at the con side and it sounds completely different. So the wording of all the initiatives on the ballot, I think, can be misleading to some voters sometimes.
Right. Research. I think, again, like when it's getting voted into law, that some of that stuff will be revised. Maybe people will take a closer look, but any of these could turn still got some time ahead of us. Like that campaign finance vote was at 50-50, which is interesting as we go into the presidential election right now that's still turning out. So
Definitely.
we'll see people decide.
Well, thank you so much for
Of course.
localizing
Thanks,
those
Julie.
for us.
Thanks, Calvin.
Great to have you.
Coming up after the break, we bring it back home with the local aspect of this election. Stay tuned.
got a king?
Go fish. In your face, in your face.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Can you help me with this? My new dad teaches me all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
He helps me with homework.
That would be 3.6795.
Thanks.
Yep.
He helps me with my decision making.
I wouldn't use this one. Ever.
And he's even teaching me how to drive.
And that's why cars have bumpers.
I'm learning so much.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
Here's your check.
Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. Got it. No?
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back. We can now report that Donald Trump won the state of Utah. He is now up 244 votes to Clinton's 215. But as exciting as the race for presidency is, we all know change starts with local elections here in Washington. Republican incumbent Kathy McMorris Rodgers has a comfortable lead over Democratic challenger Joe Pacotis, 58 to 42%. McMorris Rodgers looks to continue her streak in as the incumbent. She's been the representative since 2005, but we will update you as soon as we get an update if the race has been called tonight.
Now it's a tight race between incumbent Jay Inslee and challenger Bill Bryant, and it looks like we could possibly have a new governor. Right now, Bryant is I'm just being told Jay Inslee has won. Also, Republican Marty McClendon is currently leading Democrat Cyrus Habib in the lieutenant governor race, 53% to almost 47%. And I am being told Habib has also won as well. Now, it was also a close race for state senator earlier tonight, but incumbent Patty Murray ended up pulling 61% of the votes, winning her 5th term. Republican candidate Chris Vance only managed 39% of those votes, and Patty Murray was first elected to Senate in 1992, has been reelected 3 other times before this day. We now return to Kyle Simchuk and Josh Monroe for a closer look at how local initiatives are panning out. Kyle?
Yeah, thanks, Calvin. So, Josh, based on the results coming in on the local Washington initiatives, what do you think that says about Washington voters?
Well, Washington voters have had a lot to consider tonight in terms of their local initiatives. A lot of really salient issues to consider, from protecting the elderly to Second Amendment rights to campaign finance laws to
all over the board.
The environment. It's all over the place, and they're really important issues. And it seems that, at least at this point in time, 4 of the 6 initiatives seem to be passing. What is interesting is to consider the ones that haven't passed, and the most notable of which it comes from I-732, the proposed carbon tax. Now, part of the reason why this might have failed is that you should consider the coalition that might have gone into opposing that initiative. Now, normally you'd think on an environmental issue that maybe more right-leaning groups would be opposing this, but that's not necessarily true. Well, not completely true.
And that's kind of surprising.
Yeah, it is surprising. There have been a number of left-leaning groups that have said that the scope or the details of Initiative 732 did not really address kind of the needs of lower-income families, or didn't really propose to reduce carbon at the levels that they would have been happy with, and they would have preferred a more proactive alternative. So that's part of the reason why 732 seems to be failing tonight. But a lot of other issues that might appeal to more progressive voters seem to be succeeding, including the issue 1491 on the Second Amendment and 1501 on protecting elderly rights.
And going off of the Second Amendment related initiative, what are some of the complications you think that are written into that initiative?
Well, it seems to be that there are 4 elements that need to be considered when revoking a person's right to own a handgun or firearm. Of course, it's a very touchy issue when you deal with domestic violence and accusations of bodily harm to individuals. So,
well, some people say it almost in a way stigmatizes mental illness, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and that's been an issue that's kind of been central to the gun control debate for the last, I'd say, 20 years. Ever since there's been a kind of a rise in mass shootings throughout the country, mental illness has been at a focal point at that, and it's really important to tread carefully so as not to stigmatize people while also keeping potential victims safe from gun violence.
Do you have any idea if the NRA has weighed in on this at all?
I'm not aware, but I would imagine, based on their legislative and lobbying history, that they would be opposed to 1491. But the voters of Washington State writ large have never been ones to take too kindly to the NRA's recommendations.
Yeah. Well, certainly interesting developments. Josh, thank you. Calvin Taylor, back to you.
Well, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Josh. Up next, we'll discuss the WSU Greek system's ban of social events.
We'll also continue to keep you up to date on the presidential and local elections. Stay with us.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
The WSU Greek community is reeling after yesterday's announcement that both the interfraternity and Panhellenic councils will ban all social events for the remainder of the semester.
As promised, our own Devin Truby has continued to look into this matter.
Thank you. A mere 24 hours ago, the Interfraternity and Panhellenic Council released a moratorium canceling all social events for the Greek community. This means that even if one member is found at an unrecognized event, the entire chapter will face unrecognition. Students have taken this matter personally. Cars were vandalized at Lambda Chi Alpha, the fraternity that IFC President Nate Harris belongs to. Expletives were written on the vehicles, and the vehicles had to be scrubbed clean. Murrow News 8 will continue to update you on this matter, and join us tomorrow for an exclusive interview with Panhellenic President. Emotions are definitely running high here in Pullman. We're almost reaching a boiling point, but how is the election heating up?
Well, right now, CNN still has the electoral votes at 244 for Trump and 215 for Clinton. The most recent call was still Utah. If we get any updates, we will tell you right away.
And it's still a close race in the Senate. As we reported earlier, the House, the Republicans will retain control, but for the Senate, it's still a tight race.
Fascinating stuff here.
It's getting down to the wire, and tensions are running high as final numbers start rolling in.
When we return, Kyle Simchuk will update us on the local aspect. Stay tuned.
I'm one unlucky guy. The chance of being involved in a robbery is 1 in 757. The chances of being struck by lightning. 1 in 750,000.
Please fasten your seatbelts for unexpected turbulence.
The chances of being a victim in an airline crash? 1 in 29 million. Hey, could I get some peanuts? The chances of being involved in a car crash are far greater than lightning strikes and plane crashes. And if you are texting while driving, your risk of crash increases 23 times. Now, I may be an unlucky guy, but I don't have to be part of that statistic, and neither do you. Drive responsibly.
To Maddie, congrats on paying off all those student loans.
Finally, right?
How'd you manage that anyway?
I started tracking my spending, changed a couple of habits.
Wow, I'm kind of living paycheck to paycheck right now. I don't even know how I'm doing it.
Well, have you tried saving a little?
I want to, but where's that money gonna come from? Bill collectors, they're the worst. Am I right?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind.
Not home.
Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.
Well, Josh and Kyle have been so great for us all night, recapping local elections and initiatives. And like we've been saying all night, this race affects more than just the White House. It's also the Senate, House, but also the Supreme Court.
Yeah, our reporter Kyle Simchuk is coming back to discuss the future of the Supreme Court for after this election. Kyle?
Yeah, thanks, Calvin. So like we've been saying all night, this race affects more than just the White House, you know, the Senate, House of Representatives, but the Supreme Court. And so explain a little bit about how this will impact that.
Yeah, there are historical implications for all three branches of the federal government, and especially in the Supreme Court. We've seen over the last 10 months that the institution has kind of been operating not at full capacity. Ever since the death of Antonin Scalia in February, the nominee that President Obama selected, Merrick Garland, has yet to fill in that ninth position, and he might never do so. Now, what might happen after tonight is there are four scenarios to consider, and
these are interesting.
These are interesting.
Very
so
interesting.
if Hillary wins and the Senate retains Democratic control or gains Democratic control, she'll be able to most likely be able to put in the candidate of her choice. But if the Senate does not flip and Hillary wins, then she'll have a very difficult time putting in a more left-leaning or liberal judge or justice. On the other side, if Donald Trump wins and the Democrats take control, he will have a very difficult time putting a conservative justice in, as he's wanted to do for as long as he's been running. But that fourth scenario is if Donald Trump wins and the Republicans retain control, he might be able to fill in that empty seat that was formerly going to go to a more left-leaning judge with a conservative, and possibly fill in future seats with more conservative justices.
What do you think President Obama is thinking right now as far as his legacy? I mean, a few days ago he might not have been so concerned, but right now it's kind of a different story.
Well, if you want to just consider the Supreme Court for just a second, President Obama is not a happy camper. But if you want to talk about President Obama's legacy after tonight, I think a lot of voters agree that they take on a much more positive view of the president when considering his 8-year tenure in office and his legacy going forward. Now, we have seen in this race two candidates with almost historically high unfavorable numbers, so that reflects more positively on the sitting president. So after tonight, no matter who wins and ends up taking that seat in the Oval Office, many people will be looking fondly on years past and acting a little bit more cautiously with looking towards the future.
And what do you think the future of both Republicans and Democrats, the future of the parties and the campaigns and all that process, is this election tonight going to change that forever?
Forever, probably not. For the near future, I'd say absolutely. If I were to name a theme for the night and following this election night,
please do. Let's hear that.
It would be soul searching. Both parties would need to do a significant amount of soul searching in terms of what kind of demographics are they appealing to, what kind of base of voters do they want to appeal to, and will those parties work together going forward?
Well, yeah, and they certainly seem like they are at an identity crisis right now. Certainly the Republicans, you have Paul Ryan kind of biting his tongue at times to support his party's nominee.
Yes.
And even after the 2012 race with Romney and Obama, the GOP did the autopsy on the campaign and the party to see what they needed to do differently. They said reach out towards women and minorities, but that certainly wasn't the case with Donald Trump necessarily this year, but it may not have hurt them. So
No. And it
that,
drew, yeah.
we're actually out of time right now. Josh, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate you coming on. And
yes.
Calvin Taylor, back to you. That's all we have.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Josh. Wonderful insight from Josh once again about how people are going to see Obama once he's out of office.
Definitely. And, you know, I think no matter what the results are of this election, that we should be really grateful that we all get the chance to participate in the democratic process.
Well, we hear it every election cycle, Americans saying they'll move to Canada if their favorite candidate isn't elected president. For those of you looking for a change of scenery due to the results of the 2016 presidential election, you may be disappointed to know that the Canadian immigration website has crashed. Has anything else crashed, Taylor?
The stock market is down a few points. And, you know, we can't make a call right now as to who the next president will be. We'll have more information on that for you tomorrow night in our newscast at 7 and 10.
That concludes our 2016 election coverage. Thank you for watching.